Yay, welcome back to another episode of the Radical Healing Podcast. I'm your host, Jess Betancourt. I'm a little under the weather, so pardon my coughing or anything else my body might involuntarily do. But I do have an amazing guest today. His name is Victor Briere. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to get into his story and learn more about his work. And ready or not, here we go. Victor Briere AD is the head of the International Institute of Ayurveda, where he serves as Ayurvedic doctor and teacher. He is the author of Pulse Unveiled and will be publishing Ayurveda for Diabetes in 2025, coming up. Victor
Mhm.
has spent over 10 years learning how to understand and help people with addictions. He currently teaches other healing professionals about the nature of addiction and how to address it clinically. Victor, welcome. Thanks for
Thanks,
being
Jeff.
here.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. And I got some home remedies for you after for the cold.
Ooh, I'll take you up on that.
All right.
Perfect. I'll remind you that you said that as well. Awesome. So, Victor, I'd love for you to share with us about how you came into Ayurveda. And it's maybe, and then maybe segue into like, what is Ayurveda? As like some of us understand it as the sister science of yoga, but we'd love to hear from an Ayurvedic expert. What is Ayurveda?
Sure. So I came into Ayurveda when I was in my early 20s, but before Ayurveda, I found yoga. And I found yoga because I had a health issue I was dealing with as a very young man, 18 years old. And I had this like nagging back problem. And as an 18-year-old guy, I obviously didn't want that. It was going on, affecting my life and so on and so forth. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and I had absolutely zero knowledge of anything yoga, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, nothing, right? So my understanding of health was, you're okay, and then if you don't feel good, you go to the doctor.
Hmm.
That's what I did. So I went to the doctor. And that doctor, checked me out and said, "Okay, well, let's get an MRI." And so I got
Did
an
they
MRI.
just check your pulse and like weigh you? And then
Yeah, yeah, the usual, the
yeah,
normal thing,
just look at you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that. That was all, of course, normal. And then he said, "Okay, well, I'll send you to another specialist." And so I went to the other specialist and had the whole conversation again. And they said, "Okay, well, why don't you try physical therapy?" So I did physical therapy, and that didn't help. And then they sent me to another doctor who was a neurologist. And so the neurologist tested me they started escalating it, testing me for rarer and rarer conditions like
Hmm.
muscular dystrophy or like, that kind of stuff.
Can I interject just for a second? What was your back pain? Like, what were the sensations or what were you experiencing?
So basically, behind my left shoulder blade, there was this point that just felt, it wasn't pain, and,
Hmm.
but it just felt like kind of irritated, just like there was a knot there in the muscle. But whenever I would get someone to push on it, it seemed to just move like an inch, you know?
Weird.
So it
Uh-huh.
was like, yeah, it was kind of odd, and it just would never really go away, and there was nothing I could really do about it.
Uh-huh.
And that was it.
Annoying. It was annoying. You
Annoying,
didn't
and
feel the
yeah.
lump. Hmm.
And it was, constant. So if I could distract myself, but I couldn't ever get to go away. So if I just sat down and wasn't thinking about anything or whatnot, it would be
Hmm.
there, like
Hmm.
like some friend you don't want hanging around all
Present.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
wanted this friend to go away. Okay.
I wanted this friend to go away. So of course I tried taking ibuprofen, and I tried putting, creams on and da 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 and on and on. And anyways, you get the idea. So
Hmm.
anyways, I think it was 8 doctors later.
Oh my God.
And I grew up in LA, right? So I went to UCLA Hospital, which is this like, they have a lot of really talented people. So it wasn't like I was out in the middle of nowhere going to some, just person who may not be the best.
Highly trained medical professionals who
Yeah,
could
yeah,
give you a diagnosis.
exactly.
You're
Right.
like, next.
Yeah. So this one neurologist, which wasn't the first neurologist, it was the like second neurologist after I went through another.
God.
Yeah, he in my opinion did something that was very honest. He sat me down, he said, "Look, you're a young guy. Your condition is not life-threatening. It's undiagnosable. And unless you're going to take painkillers or do exploratory surgery, there's nothing we're going to do for you. So on the one hand, that sounds kind of like, ooh, ouch, you know? But what he was doing was telling me in the language he was probably legally allowed to use because they have a lot of rules around that, right?
Mhm.
He was telling me, he's like, stop wasting your time. We're not gonna get to the bottom of this. You're not a priority, right? We have people dying of all sorts of things with crippling chronic disease. You know, they're gonna take our priority. So that's
Mhm.
basically what he was telling me.
Mhm.
So I said, oh, okay. So at this point, I think I was 19 and I was in college. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, the world that I had known is not going to help me. And I don't want to live with this for the rest of my life. So I need to find a new world. Um,
Mhm.
so I just kind of started asking around and like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And one of my college friends at the time said, why don't you try yoga? And I said, oh, okay. You know, I wasn't against it, but I knew nothing about it. So I went to a yoga class and I could tell after the yoga class, I was like, oh, I kind of feel like a little bit better, but it
Mhm.
wasn't defined. I couldn't be like, oh, this did the trick, but it
Mhm.
was enough to motivate me.
Mhm.
So I talked to the yoga teacher and I said, hey, I have this problem. Can you do a one-on-one session with me and just see what you see? And she said, yeah, sure, of course. So in like 2 days, we had our one-on-one session. And she watched how I moved and she looked at some postural things and, said, okay, I want you to try these three postures. And I did. And within 2 weeks, it was completely gone and never came back.
Wow. What
Yeah.
were the three postures?
They were actually only like half postures. They were like preparations for postures. So there was one where I had to keep my hand against the wall and straight and rotate the shoulder back.
Uh-huh.
Um, and use the tension between the wall and my shoulder to target that muscle group. And then there
Uh-huh.
were neck stretches, and then there's a yoga posture where you cross your arms and kind of
Eagle.
the whole trap, yeah,
Yeah.
variant and stuff like that. And she made sure I was breathing right while I did it, and all the nuances and blah blah blah. But basically, I mean, I could tell immediately when I started doing them, I could like tell that it hit that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I needed.
Wow. You
Yeah.
found your sensei.
Yeah. So that was great. And now, of course, I recognize that not everyone that was an easy one, right? That was a layup. It takes a lot more work to get through a lot of different problems than doing a few stretches.
Yes.
What that did for me was open my mind to the fact that, wait a second, there is a whole other healing reality, if you want to call it, that does not prescribe to the conventional one that we're living in. That is powerful. It's not a bunch of fluff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it can go places and do things that the current system can't.
Mm-hmm. And accessible.
And it's accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people doing it. In my little college town, there was a yoga instructor doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I became fascinated with yoga and not just the mechanics of it, but all of it. I was
Mm-hmm.
also a philosophy major in college, so that was an easy transition to
Mm-hmm.
from Western to Eastern philosophy. Um, and so I traveled for a while, and then I'd still never heard of Ayurveda because this was 18, 19 years ago. Yeah, 19 years ago at this point. So at that time, yoga and Ayurveda wasn't talked about together. It was just yoga. Ayurveda was still very quiet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Banyan botanicals didn't exist yet, and all these
Mm-hmm.
popular Ayurvedic herbal stores and all that stuff. So I went traveling, and I learned about Ayurveda on my travels. And I was like, whoa, this is like the medicinal system I would want to practice if I were going to be a health practitioner. So being someone in my early 20s, I didn't fully connect the dots. Um,
A seed was planted.
yeah, yeah, but no offense to people in their early 20s, but I wasn't quite there yet on the wisdom scale. So I went back to Los Angeles. I needed a job, so I became a real estate assistant and worked as a real estate assistant for a few years, and that was not obviously not what I wanted to be doing. And through a few different people's influences and help and all that stuff, I found my way back to Ayurveda, and I decided to get trained in it, open up a clinic in LA, and then go for it.
And here you are.
And here I am 15 years later in Italy.
Awesome, awesome. I love the path that it's taken you on. So tell us a bit more of what is Ayurveda? It's the science of
Ayurveda literally means science of life.
hmm,
What that means in a practical sense, is how can I live longer? So longevity, but not just how can I live longer? How can I live longer with health?
mm-hmm,
That's what longevity means in Ayurveda.
mm,
These days, like, oh, everyone's living till their mid 80s. Well, not anymore. But, anyways, everyone's living till their mid 80s and 90s, that's longevity. But
mm-hmm,
Ayurveda would look and say, yeah, but if you're falling apart and you have tons of chronic health conditions, you're extending your years, but you're not
mm-hmm,
living your life, with a
mm-hmm,
L.
mm-hmm. I forget who said it. I think Joe Dispenza said it, but it was like making your health span equal your lifespan.
Yes, that's a great way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is Ayurveda. Ayurveda means that, literally, the science of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Extending health for as long as you live, for as
extending
greatest
health.
health as you can possibly enjoy. And who
Right.
doesn't want that? Right?
Well, Ayurveda says it's one of the fundamental goals of life,
Mm,
which I think is pretty accurate. Most people would
mm,
agree.
mm-hmm,
But then here's the catch. Ayurveda has a very different definition of health than what we normally think of it as health.
mm. Throw it at us.
You want it? All right, I'll throw
Yes.
it at you. All right.
Mhm.
So, well, let me maybe ask you this, even though I'm not the podcast host and I shouldn't be asking you questions. I'm going to do it.
I
What
don't
would
mind.
you say, like, the conventional allopathic definition of health looks like? Something ballpark.
What does it look like?
Well, what is it? The, conventional definition of health, if you were to go into any kind of allopathic doctors.
That's such a great question. I feel like it would be like, eat this, take this, do that.
Okay. So yeah, it's a short list. It's
Yes.
basically, if you're not suffering, you're healthy. That's for the most part what it is.
If you're getting by, it's okay.
It's
Good
okay.
enough.
Right.
Yeah.
The Ayurvedic definition of health is you have balanced tissue elements, all your tissues, including blood,
Mm,
that stuff are
mm,
balanced. You have a balanced metabolism, which in Ayurveda is called Agni.
mm-hmm,
You have balanced doshas, which I don't know if you even want to get into that. That's a whole other topic on its own. But basically, physiological functional elements. All your senses are functioning well, and your bowel movements are good, your urination's good, your sweating's good,
mm.
fully mobile, and the hardest one of all, you're happy.
You're happy.
Yes. And the Ayurvedic terminology for it is your mind is full of bliss. So even more than just happy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then at the end of that, it's because they were very aware that's a tall order, but they go on to say that person and only that person can be considered healthy. Now, how many people do you know who fit that description?
A wannabe version of me.
Sure.
And then maybe you.
Yeah, right.
In my real life, like not many people would have all of those, maybe some of those, and maybe striving for others, but not a 100% check down the list of everything that you just said. Most people I know are working on some version, some part of that description.
Exactly. So this is not to say that health is an all or nothing thing, but the reason they phrase it like that is to to say something. It's like, look, health requires a lot of things. It's not this like automatic happening in our life. And whenever any of those areas fall out of balance, seek to balance them. Because no, it's very rare that all of them are off all at once. But it's also very rare that all of them are together all at once.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be the goal of true health, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sets the bar at a very different place than just like, oh, I'm fine. Yeah.
Content,
Yeah.
sufficient,
So I,
mediocrity civics.
yeah, Ayurveda has a bunch of principles that strive to help a person achieve that level of health.
Mm. Can you tell us about some of those, or some of the more important ones, or maybe ones that encompass some of the others?
Yeah, sure. That's what makes it holistic. It's like your body, if you have a problem with your eye, Ayurveda is never going to say, oh, well, let's just look in the eye. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, there's some, okay. That's probably coming from some kind of digestive disturbance, plus some kind of, blood disturbance, plus there's probably 5 or 6 causal factors involved in creating that one manifestation in the eye.
Mm.
So there's this principle in Ayurveda where there's the manifestation of disease, which is that's when most people go to the doctor, when a disease is manifested. So I
Mm-hmm.
have the rash, or my vision is blurry, or my hair is falling out, or whatever, right? Those are all manifestations. But
Mm-hmm.
Ayurveda says disease starts way before it's manifested,
Mm-hmm.
before it's manifested in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
So you can deal with your imbalances way before the disease is manifested. Those things typically include what you put in your body. That's not just food. That's all liquids. That's the air we breathe. That's sense perceptions are considered things that we put in our body in Ayurveda.
Mm.
So do I watch a bunch of terrible movies, whatever it is, right? Am I exposed to traumatic external looking things?
Mm-hmm.
Those are forms of quote unquote nourishment in Ayurveda, and they impact the physiology quite heavily. And that's all vagus nerve stuff, which I know we can talk about later. Uh,
Mm-hmm. So essentially, anything you're consuming,
exactly.
whether it's in your face hole or with one of your other senses.
Yeah, or anything you put on your
It's
skin.
faithful to say mouth in just a comical way, for those of you who are
Yeah,
wondering. But yeah, whatever you're consuming.
whatever you're consuming. So, but that includes things you put on your skin because your skin's a
Yeah.
digestive organ, right? So our body is constantly consuming, and whatever it consumes, it has to digest. And the goal of digestion is you take something nourishing, your body has the ability to rip it apart, essentially, take its component parts, and then use those components to rebuild itself, tissue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the digestive process. And if your body can't do that properly, tissues start to get weak or malfunction. And that's what we call disease.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a simplified version of
Mm-hmm.
why it's so important to understand what's going into our body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one. I mean, there are literally hundreds of Ayurvedic principles for
Could you
different.
tell us about like maybe two more of the main ones, like what you're consuming, and whatever you're consuming, you have to digest,
Right,
be it beneficial or detrimental,
right, exactly.
as one. What would be maybe the second or one of the more important other ones that you could mention for us?
Another really important principle is sleep quality.
Mm-hmm.
So sleep, a lot of people know this and then immediately ignore it. But that's okay. That's a different problem.
In the morning, it's a good idea, but at night, when you're doing the
Yeah.
fourth episode on Netflix, you're like, "What? Tomorrow."
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is a fundamental principle of Ayurveda is allowing time to pass will always make diseases worse.
Allowing time. Sorry to say it again.
Time to pass.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
sleep. Sleep is where we do our repair predominantly. And there are a lot of things that affect sleep. So obviously what time you go to bed, how many hours you sleep, what's on your mind before you go to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
what have your sense organs consumed throughout the day affects your sleep that night. What has your body consumed throughout the day affects sleep that night. What
Mm-hmm.
time was your last meal and what did you eat? Heavily affects sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, you name it. It all affects sleep. And if you don't sleep well, your body doesn't heal. So you can assume what
You
happens
can
next.
do that simple math.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
We'll assume the intelligence level of our audience is high, and they can do that math. Sleep quality for sure. And
Okay.
it really does matter what your day was like leading up to your sleep. You can't just plan on having good sleep, but then do all sorts of come what may during the day without taking intentional care, right? It's like planning on having a good sleep requires that I plan for that sleep with the actions that I take during my day. What I eat, how late I eat, how much I watch, how much media I take in, sleeping with my phone next to my head, all of
All
those
that.
things. Hmm.
Yeah, and the list goes on. And now some people might be like, "Oh my God, like it's not worth it." And but right, but when you list it out like that, it sounds like this crazy stuff. But literally most of those things you can weave in naturally to your day. If
Right.
you're right, with a little bit of planning.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a major overhaul. I think a lot of people steer away from dramatic health changes because it's too disruptive to the lifestyle that they become accustomed to.
Of
And
course.
it's making these like minute shifts that become repetitious that excite other changes, right? Like I have a lot of my clients wake up and drink coffee right away. Not just my clients, but a lot of people I talk to. And so I, instead of saying, don't do that or, shut all that down, I encourage them to just wake up and have a glass of water first. It's just to make
Mhm.
that simple shift first and to make that shift repetitious. And then they can implement other changes when that one change has taken place. We have a visitor from my 7-year-old clown. She's going to chill right there. Um, Hi, Louie. I'm going to call darling. Okay. Okay. She knows. She's aware. Okay. I'm not going to edit that out, BT dub, and because I'm busy. Can you tell us a third tenet of Ayurveda, one that would be important
Sure.
to know?
Third tenet of Ayurveda is a little bit more complex. It is how does a person use their creative energy throughout the day?
Ooh,
Yeah, that's the one that
such
gets
a good one.
all. Yeah. Right. So everyone's heard of like, oh yeah, of course, I know I need to sleep. I know I need to eat, right? I'll get to it. Or I'm doing it, right? Let's not be too sarcastic.
Right. Too black
And
and
right.
white.
Yeah. So, but then the one of the third big, huge factors in determining physical health, physical health is how you go about your day. What is your attitude? Who are you relating to? What you use, whatever physical energy you have towards, and how efficiently you use it, plays a massive role in long-term health.
Mm,
So
mm,
this is the part of Ayurveda where you can incorporate, well, yeah, stress is bad for health and da 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 and on and on. But Ayurveda goes into great detail breaking that whole kind of section of itself down to like what why is it so important to use your creative energy? What does it do to you if you don't use it properly?
mhm,
And so on and so forth. So it's not just this broad blanket statement. It's like, yeah, do good things. It's like, no, if you treat other people poorly, these are the physical health consequences you might face. If you carry internalized anger, these are the physical health consequences you might face. If you don't resolve grief, these are the physical consequences you might face. If you don't do wholesome work in accordance with your dharma, which is a Sanskrit word for purpose, right?
mhm.
These are
For
the
sure.
physical these are the types of diseases you're
Mhm.
probably going to develop.
Ooh,
Whole
this one's
science.
giving
Yeah.
me like a visceral response because I think it's one of the more overlooked tenets of health. Like people feel and sense this frustration of like their life is not being used purposefully. And it's
Mhm.
not like we're not all Da Vinci's, of course, but like we all have creative energy and creative power. And when it's not spent into creating, it's actually, I would think there's like a direct inverse relationship with consuming and creating. So if you're not creating, you're probably consuming unless you're in a total rest state of neutrality, which is probably not happening either. But if we think about like how much time we spend scrolling even or consuming media that is not helpful or like generating helpful thinking power in us. This is like an act of consuming, and it's like sucking or using the battery of our creativity, which we then experience as like sadness, depression, or anxiety, lack of purpose. I think this is a really super important one. I just like jumped on it, sorry, because it like got me, it got me a little bit excited. Like this one made my ears perk up, because the first two we generally tend to know, right? And we know if we're not doing them. Are we not eating well? Are we not consuming well? Is our sleep shitty? But I think we turning up the attention to like how really are you using your creative energy is so crucial, especially at this time in life. Hi, Louie. You're interrupting me, darling. I told you I was on a call. I love you. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I love
Yeah,
that.
and within that branch is a big one for a lot of people. Included in the creative energy is sex,
Mm-hmm.
something that's not talked about in allopathy unless you go specifically to talk about that.
Right.
But how we use our sexual energy, being the kind of primal version of our creative energy,
Mm-hmm.
is has a huge health ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
So that is another huge area that Ayurveda talks about
Mm-hmm.
at length. And in an Ayurvedic clinic, all these things get talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no such thing as a 5 minute Ayurvedic consultation.
It's more like a 5 month
Yeah.
diagnostic process. Um, no, but it's so helpful to really, I think, succinctly to just help folks understand that nothing exists in isolation within the human body or the human experience. It's all interrelated to the whole, all the parts, right? Like we are a sum of all the parts. We're not just parts separately, which is what allopathic or Western medicine does. It's just look at that spot on your back, or just look at your toe. But does it? I've never personally been to a doctor who's asked me about, except for Ayurvedic doctors, which I have been to, but my diet, my thoughts, what I watch, what I think about, what I do. Um, None of that. I've never been to a doctor who's asked me if I smoked or drank or ate sugar or anything.
Right. And there's there's two sides to that story I like to talk about when that's brought up is one, yes, that is not the greatest. Two, there's a reason it exists like that. And the reason it exists like that is because there's a high demand for it. So, it's easy to say my doctor didn't do this, my doctor didn't do that, but the system developed in such a way, well, one, for profit, we know that. But
Mm-hmm.
two is because how many people have I talked to? And it's like, if you keep eating that donut, you're going to have serious consequences. Yeah, I know. I'm going to keep eating the donut. It's like, okay. But if they go to an allopathic doctor, it's like, I wasn't trained in diet. It's not important to my thing. Take this pill and your blood sugar will go down.
Mm-hmm.
And it does for a time.
Mm-hmm.
But that same person won't give up the donut.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like to keep the scales a little bit more balanced so that
Mm.
people don't start doing the doctor blaming thing.
I don't want to be a doctor blamer, but
Not you, but people in general. I know
I like
people
the
do it.
subjective view.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's a different segue where the conversation could go, but I think I'd rather segue it into the Ayurvedic lens of looking at addiction. So, like, say the donut eater or the cigarette smoker or the Jack Daniels nightly drinker, someone who is very well aware that this thing that they're doing is not helping them anymore, helping them in the way that it had once served. It's kind of like this thing has run its course, but they can't let it go or they won't let it go. Can you tell us from the Ayurvedic lens, help us unravel the mystery of addiction a little bit more?
Yeah, the mystery of addiction is something that I have, for the first 10 years of my career, I was practically banging my head against the wall because I noticed there were certain patterns. There were the people who came in and they made some changes and they got better and it was fine. There were the people who came in and did it all and it was great. And then there were people who really wanted to change And you could tell you could tell they weren't faking it. They really did want it.
Mm-hmm.
And they like literally couldn't. And those people were different than the average person who's just like, oh, I just don't want to. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there was a different quality to the feeling of the conversation, almost a desperation
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I started looking into addiction and what Ayurveda has to say about addiction. Um, and there was a lot, of course, because addiction's been around since humans have been around.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to use a word here that I don't. It's a little bit, a lot. Some people don't like it, but it's the right word. So I'm going to qualify it before I use it to pad it.
Okay.
All right. So Ayurveda does categorize different types of diseases, and for addiction, it's a small is one of my qualifying words.
Mm-hmm.
Pocket, right? One area, small area. If
Okay.
you want to use a metaphor, in the mind. So one select area of the mind, not the whole mind.
Uh-huh.
One area of the mind that is insane. It does not process reality normally.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have this person who has an addiction, which means they have a pocket of insanity in their mind around specific substances or behaviors. And they can be 100% sane everywhere else. Oftentimes, very high performing, super functional,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever metric you want to use to qualify a healthy person.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be very healthy, physically fit, the whole thing, da da da. But when it came to this one substance or behavior, or little subset of substances or behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
it was like they were completely insane. You
Mm-hmm.
can't talk to them. You can't reason with them. You can't say, hey, that's really bad for you. You can't yell and scream and say, this is really bad for the whole family. It doesn't matter. That part of them just says, yeah, I know the sky's blue. Yes, yeah. I'm gonna, oh, isn't it a great idea to go drink more or smoke more or whatever? It's like, I can control it this time. I can get it, whatever. So what I notice in conversations with a lot of my clients struggling with addiction is that afterwards, after they would go through a spell, so to speak, they would be extremely remorseful. And it was real. They're not faking it. They're not sociopaths,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're like, I don't even, it's so subtle. That's the key word. I don't even know when I'm entering that like part of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is what the texts of Ayurveda are describing.
And so, what is Ayurveda's approach then in managing or working with people who are suffering from an addiction?
Right. So you have to know what phase of the addiction they're in. So addiction in Ayurveda, and also, by the way, this is echoed in a lot of 12 steps because it's just an accurate assessment of the problem. It doesn't matter what modality you use, right? So there's the person who's in denial who is not aware that they have an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
There's the person who is aware that something's off, but they haven't really pegged it down yet.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the person who is aware, but still engaging in the substance or behavior. And lastly, there's the recovered person.
Okay.
And I think it's important here. You got to be able, clinically, you have to be able to know where each person's at.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing that's my job, right? And it doesn't matter who else has told them what. It doesn't matter if their sister said, you're an addict. That doesn't mean that. All that matters is that they understand
Of
what they
course.
have going on. That's the only thing that can bring any kind of change about. Because what you're doing is you have to leverage the sane part of them against the insane part, the insane little ball pocket in their mind. And they can't ever return to that insane ball. Because once they do, that insanity co-opts their willpower and uses it for its insane purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Or guess what? Doing a substance or a behavior.
So how is it managed within an Ayurvedic clinical setting?
So there's a bad assumption in today's society that addiction comes from, I'm not saying everyone believes this, but it's flying around. That addiction comes from trauma. Ayurvedically speaking, trauma is maybe one of about 8 factors that creates an addiction, because there are plenty of people who have trauma who are not addicts.
Mm-hmm.
So trauma in and of itself is not sufficient to create addiction.
It's not a guarantee,
It's
but it
not a
can.
guarantee, but it's one of the pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can unravel your trauma history till you're blue in the face, and that does not mean your addiction is going to vanish into thin air. Okay. The second big factor is predisposition, literally familial predisposition.
Mm-hmm.
Your father was an alcoholic, there is a higher chance that you will be an alcoholic. Not guaranteed, but a higher chance. So if you have trauma and your father was an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
right, it's getting riskier and
Higher
riskier.
probability.
The third is literal physical health. There may have been a period in one's life where they were ill or were treating their body very poorly. And at that point, an addiction can take root. And it might not become what it looks like today, because addictions evolve over time, right? They're chronic and progressive. They change, they evolve.
Mm-hmm.
They get bigger typically.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the age of 10, someone might have been not feeling well physically, not eating right, not sleeping right, all that stuff. Maybe there were some traumatic type or triggering experiences, and they're predisposed because they have a father, mother, grandparent, whatever. All those things happening together now set the stage for what will become alcoholism when they're 19, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and we can keep going, but you get the gist. A lot of things have to come together to generate an addiction. Because an addiction is very different than a bad habit. People need to understand that. There
Tell
are,
us in your words the
yeah,
difference between the
there
two.
are plenty of people who have bad habits. They drink a glass of wine every night. That's a bad habit. Does not mean they're an addict. Does not mean they're an alcoholic. They should stop drinking a glass of wine, and that's a different process for them. You can speak to that person, you can almost argue with them, and a lot of times it will work if you can give them a good enough evidence. And you kind of do it with them and tango with them for a while, right? Because it's a bad habit, they die hard. But an addict, you can't do that at all. It's pointless, because they can't reason their way through it. It's a whole
Mm-hmm.
different pathology. But when we meet, especially if we're not trained, when we meet people who have addictions, we assume that we could talk to them like it's a bad habit.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually either does nothing or makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's best just not to even do it.
What is the solution then if you're dealing with someone who's actually in high addiction status? How do you work with that person in an Ayurvedic setting?
If they come into the clinic, let's say there's someone who's kind of not in absolute denial, but they're kind of like, I know something's wrong, but I don't know what. And so, listen, a lot of listening, talking, listening, asking questions, start getting them working on some other things without directly addressing the specific behavior, right? Get them working on their health in general. Maybe they need to do some emotional work. Maybe they need to do some creative energy work, like, their life's a mess or is starting to fall apart or whatever, right? And you ask them to change things that they can change because they're not part of that insanity bubble, right? Then as they clean those things up and realize that there is this thing that they like literally cannot deal with, they don't know why they keep, they're literally sitting at a table. I had a client who said he realized he was an alcoholic when he had been doing work on his own health,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he was very successful in most of it. But he like wanted to stop drinking, but he literally like would just be drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so one night he was sitting at a table and he had a bottle of whiskey in front of him, like a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he stared it down and he said, I'm going to win. I'm going to beat you. I'm not going to drink you. his next memory was waking up in a hospital.
Oh God.
And at that point, he was like, I have a problem.
Mm,
Right. And then once the awareness is dawned that they've got this thing inside them that does not operate like normal rules, now you can get them more serious help. They've now basically done step one. I admit I'm powerless.
hmm
And so now the rest of the steps are open, and Ayurveda basically has the same version of that. You know, it's not 12 steps formally, but it's the same idea, right? But here's the key. They have to go through a process that helps them build a barrier around that insane pocket in their mind. A person who just has a bad habit can smoke one cigarette, can drink one glass of wine, can eat one donut. A person who has a genuine addiction must do abstinence,
No,
complete and
totally.
utter abstinence.
I
Yes, it's the
agree.
only way, because they'll say, trust me, I've heard so many stories. Well, but I did just drink one glass of wine for a week and I was fine. It's like, yeah, but if you look at the pattern over 5 years, in 3 weeks, you'll have another glass of wine for a week. And then in 3 more weeks, it's 2 glasses of wine. And then in a year, you're under the table again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, and then the cycle repeats.
That is the proverbial slippery slope where people find a deeper identification, I think, with how severe their addiction is or isn't.
Right.
Because, like, personally, I coach and do hypnosis for people within the spectrum of alcohol use, but most of my clients are in the gray area factor, where like you can work with their subconscious mind and you can work with the way that they identify, so that they can remove repetitious use and like come in and out. But it is a specified group of people, right? It's like in the middle, people who are highly addicted, who have activated the insanity ball. Is that what we're
Sure.
calling it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of
It's
that.
the
Yeah.
insanity ball that cannot be tamed, cannot be reasoned with. Um, Perhaps types of therapy that are specified, like you could even do hypnosis for this, but it's a very highly specified way of working with the insanity ball itself.
Mhm.
um, yes, those people I would say can absolutely only work with themselves when they have come to a state of abstinence or total refrain,
Right.
sobriety from a substance, so that they can then create some distance or some space from themselves and the insanity ball, knowing that they are not it, but it's just like a fragmentation of their psyche, so they can create space from it, so they know that they're not it, right? Because when you can see yourself as separate than something, then that's when change can happen. I don't know if you agree with that, but like that's how I've come to work with people and understand how real change can happen when we just stop identifying that we are this thing, or that I am an addict, or that I am this insanity ball. Well, what if we just create some space, some distance from it, detach, release a little bit, which requires its own messy processes most of the time, but to see yourself as separate from the thing that has been happening to you, that seems out of your control, that defies definition sometimes, the mystery of addiction. So yeah, I don't like so in your practice, are you saying that you work with people to then highlight other aspects of health, to work on other aspects of health, so that this insanity ball becomes less and less accessible to them, or further and further away, or how does that work?
Well, if I realize if a person comes and they're struggling, and this happens over maybe quite a few sessions, but because this is never want to jump to the conclusion, oh, this person has an addiction, because that's a serious Ayurvedic diagnosis, so to speak, right? Like addiction's hardcore. It's a heavy hitter.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the addiction isn't one of the, people imagine in their head like a gutter drunk or something like that, right? Or someone strung out on heroin. That's not what addiction really looks like for most people. It could be not eating,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you get a bunch of social praise for that.
Yeah,
Right. All the
reinforces the
Yeah,
problem. Mm-hmm.
it's very sneaky stuff. So I never jump to a conclusion, but like, let's say dealing with a person and talking to a person and helping them figure out their health. Because a lot of people with addiction, they come first because they have another problem that they want to deal with that is somehow related to the addiction, but maybe they don't realize that yet.
Mm-hmm.
An obvious example is alcoholic comes in with stomach issues. I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or someone suffering from anorexia comes in with anemia. I want to deal with my anemia. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, what are your eating habits? Oh, I eat once a day. Oh, okay. Anyways. So after a lot of conversation, my goal is to help the person dispel the self-delusion that they don't have an addiction
Mm-hmm.
and become clear on that, get eyes on it, right? It's like, that's what it is. Even though I really wish that weren't there, it is there.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can, from my sanity, I can actually engage in working on it. I can
Mm-hmm.
strategize around it. I can meet the right people. I can talk to the right people. I can't be fooled anymore by other people who actually encourage the addiction without even knowing it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oh, come on, you're not an alcoholic. Just come have one drink.
Yeah, well-meaning friends.
Well-meaning,
Yeah.
well-meaning friends, right? All that stuff needs to happen. And so even while we're talking about other things, that's in the back of my mind is guiding them to that place. Because if the addiction doesn't get dealt with, there's no point in doing much else.
Mm-hmm.
Their health is going to collapse eventually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a foundational thing. You can't avoid it. You can't work your
Mm-hmm.
way around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing different perspectives from different modalities about how to approach addiction because it isn't a one size fits all place for anybody, right? Addiction looks really different for most
Extremely different.
people. Yeah, yeah,
As unique as their own mind.
absolutely. Yeah, as the
Yep.
individual.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's not like anything can really be prescribed that works. There can be
Oh,
modalities that work, but they need to be highly customizable.
extremely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the down to the conversation, right? The conversation has to work for that person, and everybody needs different things in a conversation, a health conversation.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
you got to look at their family situation, what kind of support that they have or don't have. All that kind of stuff has to be taken into account when helping someone who has an eating compulsion deal with their eating compulsion, or an alcoholic deal with alcohol,
Mhm.
or any of that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the environments that people are in, habits, social circles, routines, like all of this is so strongly ingrained in people's lives that it's actually hard to see sometimes, which is why I think it's also hard to see if you are someone who's living inside of an addiction. Like it was hard for me, honestly, because it was just my lifestyle, like it was just
Right.
my friends and like my environment, and it was all really conducive and serving and enabling me to just keep going. And if I had not ever, I think at any point been like, I think I drink too much, like, I don't think it would have really been pointed out to me, to be honest, because I bled into the environment that I was in. Still not to just make this a personal story time, but like, I I'm still in the same relationship. I have the same friends, but like I can see what I couldn't see before was that I was just like partaking in an environment that was supportive of me not knowing that anything was wrong.
Sure, absolutely. And that's the subtle, I think in AA they say, alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what addiction is. Those are the Ayurvedic qualities are subtle, is its primary quality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult to get to the place of being able to step back and look at it because it's so subtle. It's like your shadow.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how,
Always there.
it's always there. And it's like you don't notice it, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's its quality, its fundamental quality. So,
Mm-hmm.
for those people who consider like something's wrong, like I think I might be dealing with something, don't even know what to call it. If you get that weird feeling, talk to someone who's a professional at sussing these things out, because that's what it's going to take.
Hmm.
Don't try and do it alone.
Don't try and do it alone. And if you are at that step where you're like, something is wrong, this is just um, a share from my personal experience and how I speak with clients. And the thing keeps coming to you, and it's like, oh, it's the way that you're drinking. Oh, it's the way that you're smoking. And you push that away and you push that away. And you do the thing that you don't want to hear, that's what it is. The
Yeah.
thing that you don't want it to be, you're like, it can be anything but that. Not my one thing, not my favorite thing. Okay, well, that's the thing. Like if you're talking, just notice, audience, please, dear members, if you are someone who is speaking to yourself this way and pushing it away, that's the thing. The thing you don't want to look at is the thing that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And the beautiful thing about recovery and going, if you do have an addiction and you can identify it and you admit you're powerless over it because you are, and you go through a process of recovery and become sober in whatever your behavior or substance is. Almost, I mean, you tell me, almost everyone I know who has gone through that process is like elated to have gone through that process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're on the other side, like, oh God, I wish I could just have one more drink. Like, thank God I did that. Like, my life
I
is so much better now.
For sure, for sure. Well, and to be completely candid and honest with you, I'm probably still in some phase of that process myself because I never identified as an alcoholic. And I definitely understand that people who do have more of a, hopefully more of an expedited process to recovery, I still will drink some beers here and there. I'll have a glass of wine, maybe, but I'm really, really picky about it. And I also notice that shit, I'm really like studying myself as I go through, like, am I choosing to have this beer and why? And like, what about, like, I'm really like analyzing myself and observing myself and documenting these things. So I'm still in like maybe the end process of deciding if I want to be someone who is completely sober or not. But I also don't feel like I'm in a place of immediacy where I have to make that decision. So I can't speak to being someone who's like gone through this commitment to sobriety as a means of saving my own life because that just doesn't apply to me personally. Um, so I don't know. I can't speak from my own experience what that's like on the other side of things, but every person who I've ever spoken to and people who are very close to me and the people that I know who have done that process only wish that they had done it sooner.
Yep, that's the only regret.
Yes, the only one. No one is ever like,
Oh,
oh,
I hate being
why
sober.
am I sober? I wish that I still drank a fifth every day. Like, please. No, that's not the story. It's like they're really stories of salvation and massive transformation. Sobriety stories are some of my favorite stories, along with near-death experience stories, for this like similarity of like being gifted the life that you have but seeing it like that, right? Like life really is a gift, and people who have a near death experience and or sobriety story, some have both. It's like, I am here. I am not going to take this day for granted. It's like such a different way of seeing the life that you already have, a life anew. But I don't have that yet. I did almost die once, and I am in some sort of transformational state of shifting into sobriety. I don't know. I don't know. But I have come a long way, and I love speaking to people like yourself who can offer some different paths that people can step into, because as we know, AA works for some people, but it's not for everybody.
Right.
Sometimes a, sometimes medication is necessary. Sometimes deeper, more radical allopathic treatments are necessary uh, for the immediate necessity of somebody's life being saved, right?
Sure,
It
absolutely.
can be in a longer treatment. I believe that Ayurveda is definitely a really valid route to take. I appreciate so much your perspective and your take on things, and thank you so much for offering us your wisdom today. Where can we find you, Victor, online or elsewhere? Go to Italy, everybody.
Yeah, come visit me in Italy. So you can find me on my website is www.iiayurveda.com. And I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes because that's very hard to spell if you don't know how to spell Ayurveda.
I will for sure.
But it's International Institute of Ayurveda. And or you can just email me, Victor at
Ooh.
iiayurveda.com. And I'm happy to talk to anyone to describe to them, answer their questions about how Ayurveda works or how they can be helped. Anyone who is struggling from any kind of addiction wants to get free from it. No cost. Just call me.
A complimentary consultation.
Yep. Just
Okay.
call me and we'll
That's so
talk and
generous. So
see if
lovely of
there's
you.
help for you there. And yeah, so I'm very easy to get a hold of, and this is what I do, nothing else. So
Full passion, creative energy into being an Ayurvedic doctor.
yes, 100%.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Victor. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks for being here. And everyone, thank you so much. Please go visit Victor online. Send him an email if you feel called to reach out for help and receive some Ayurvedic consultation. And we look forward to being with you again next week.
When your company earns unlimited 2% cash back on all purchases with Capital One, that's serious business. So Stephen at SandCloud got a serious business card, the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One.
We used our 2% cash back to help build our retail presence.
Savvy, Stephen.
And we get big purchasing power, so our business can spend more and earn more.
The Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus.